So I want to welcome Lisa, Tasha are here. And of course, Alicia, my name is Julie. I'm one of the adult services librarians here at the Round Rock Public Library. Welcome to this Empathy All In Relating to One Another Through Empathy program. I would like to introduce our speaker, our presenter. It's Alicia Kae Miller. She's a humanitarian, empathy activist, and founder of Empathy Uprise, a social movement galvanizing humanity toward greater compassion and less hate. Her balance of intuition, street smarts, academic rigor, and travel to over 20 countries is the impetus behind the mission of Empathy Uprise to shift humanity from me to we by inspiring leaders to become empathy activists in their lives and work. Through advocacy, inclusion, and positivity, Empathy Uprise utilizes seminars, speaking, and training to shine a light on the dark parts of our lives and communities. It's time to get closer. Are you ready? And just a few housekeeping things. She'll be taking questions after certain breaks in the presentation. So if you have a question, feel free to raise your little digital hand, or you can also type a message in the chat, and I'll make sure that Alicia gets your questions and is able to answer. So Alicia, if you want to go ahead and get started, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Julie. And good evening, Lisa and Tasha. I am, as Julie said, Alicia Kae Miller, empathy activist and founder of Empathy Uprise, and I am on a mission to shift humanity from me to we. I want to thank you both so very much for your interest in empathy and for joining our conversation this evening. I aim for a very, very lively dialogue, so I want to first start with a question. And my question is, what does empathy mean to you? So please take a few moments, think about it, and if you're comfortable, please feel free to weigh in via the chat, or if you want to step up to the virtual mic, go ahead and raise your hand. Again, the question, what does empathy mean to you? And Julie, you're welcome to weigh in too. Oh, I see someone in the chat. Putting yourself, Julie's right on. Yes, Julie, you are, that is it. That is it. My only thing that I always say to people is to remember, we can't walk the exact walk that someone walks. We can walk right beside them, but you're spot on. That is definitely empathy. All right. Thank you. And so according to Merriam-Webster, as we can all see, the feeling, empathy is the feeling that you understand and share another person's experiences and emotions. And a lot of people mistake empathy for sympathy or pity, and it couldn't be anything further from the truth. It is simply understanding where someone's coming from. It doesn't mean that you had to have had that identical experience, but it is that you can share in that experience. And when I was 7 years old, I exhibited empathy without even realizing it. And what happened was a schoolmate of mine, his house burned down, and their entire life was turned upside down in a matter really of minutes. And I felt so compelled at the age of 7 that Jeff should have a warm winter coat because I had one, and February where I grew up was very, very cold. And so I insisted to my mom, I want to break open my piggy bank. I want to get Jeff a winter coat. And so when I look back at that, I think, how did I know? And we hear stories a lot, and generally this time of year, about young people offering up these wonderful opportunities to make donations and ways to give back. And so the way I view it, and I look back, I think as children, we are unbelievably curious, and we have that raw emotion. But then there's a period when we become self-conscious and we put our filters on. And what I am seeking to inspire with everyone tonight is to raise your awareness of one another so that we're making that greater connection through empathy to not only one another, but really more importantly, ourselves. And so now that we have a framework through my childhood story and by Merriam-Webster definition, I want to discuss our conversational goals. And so we are going to talk about the practice of empathy through family and business and community, and why this all matters to you, empathy along this vein, and why it matters, because it matters to you, and it matters to me, and it matters to all of us. And this I want to illuminate, that's why we all want to belong. And this is why we go to family reunions. It's why we hang out at the water cooler. It's why we join community clubs. And I'll also share some easy actions that you can take to put empathy in action today. And also I'll share a brief introduction to me and why I got in the business of empathy, and a slice of what we're doing over at Empathy Uprise. And I want to pause here and see if anyone has any questions by what I've said thus far. And again, this is an opportunity to step up to the virtual mic or weigh in the chat. Okay, all righty. So we will keep moving. About me a little bit. I born and raised Washingtonian, very, very proud fan of the Seahawks. I have lived in New York City. I've lived in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I've been down here in Austin now for the last 4.5 years. I've worked, as you can see, 26 years in corporate America. I worked in aviation. I worked in banking, I worked in biotechnology. And one of the reasons that I moved around a lot was because I was searching for connectedness, because I don't think I've ever felt more left out than I have in corporate America. And I truly have seen, and I should backtrack. When I say that, I'm not saying that I didn't make great connections with people, but it was just, I didn't feel there was an opportunity to verbalize what was truly happening. It was very top-down, hierarchical. And so I experienced firsthand how a lack of empathy affects motivation, emotional well-being, and overall self-worth. And so this may have occurred with you too. And I would love to have you share that with us during this conversation. Moving on, I am a great lover of travel. As Julie said, I have traveled to over 20 countries. And this travel, coupled with that experience in corporate America, compelled me to really want to give back in a meaningful way and create something bigger than myself, hence Empathy Uprise. And with that said, I do actively volunteer in humanitarian aid, and recently was truly beside myself because my dad offered to join me on my next volunteer gig. And his offer exemplified empathy and shined a very, very bright light on the importance of respecting and understanding what motivates one another. As I said, my mission is to shift humanity from me to we, and I do this through empathy activism, and this is just one of the many ways that I connect with people. And I have truly gained a lot through conversation. It's my favorite pastime. And these conversations are based with people here in the US and abroad. And really what I've drawn out from all of this travel is that we all fundamentally want the same thing. We want to be happy, we want to be healthy, and we want what is best for our families. And so these conversations and that takeaway, again, compelled me to launch Empathy Uprise. And it was just a little over a year ago. And my aim is to recruit folks like you who are like me and want to join the mission to essentially show how we, through empathy, have more in common than not. To illuminate my mission, I created Solidaris, which is a monthly video cast where I put empathy in action through kitchen table conversations. And when I say that, it means I'm having the conversations that we're having at our kitchen table, but I want to bring them out into the light so that they can be shared and experienced with other people. And these conversations are with folks just like you and me. So I'm just going to play a brief snapshot of what we're doing over there at Empathy Uprise. So sorry, advanced too soon. I'm having trouble here. There we go.
We're all born with empathy, but it was there that, you know, the superpower got switched on. I guess that was the bolt of
I
lightning.
always knew when something wasn't right. You know, I just couldn't keep, you know, my mouth quiet. You know what I mean? I had to speak up about it.
And I'm the same as you. I always looked at situations of, oh, yay, I get to make new friends. I get to see something different. I get to have new experiences.
See where we're different, see where we can come together and really strengthen one another and build something that we really believe in.
You gotta be understanding. You have to see different perspectives and understand that persons themselves, what they're going through, because you don't know what they're going on with their life.
Even at parties for kids, sometimes they don't get invited because of their diets. And so they get excluded from a lot of things.
So whether you're not, you know it, your positive outlook in the world pushed it, because you told me without saying, hey, Rich, you can do this. You threw it out there and said, Rich, you're going to do this, which I thought was incredible.
And that's what I feel like being truly open-minded is about, and what empathy is truly about. It's saying, you know what, you know, these people have their flaws, and so do I.
So there you have it. That's a little slice of how we are exhibiting empathy. So I want to start with our families. And this is really where we put love in action. And whether we realize it or not, empathy starts with our own individual actions. And so when you consider the Merriam-Webster definition, the feeling that you understand and share another person's experience and emotions, I feel very strongly that we have to ask ourselves, how empathetic are we being with ourselves? We've been in a global pandemic collectively for nearly 2 years. And so my question for you is, are you being curious with yourself? Are you checking in with how you're feeling? And then extending this curiosity to include your immediate and extended family. Because I feel strongly that if we're not being honest with ourselves about what we're feeling, we truly cannot empathize with someone else. So we need to definitely start with ourselves, and that's where we put empathy in action. And so consider, speaking of family, if we consider my mom's response to my wanting to break open my piggy bank to buy my schoolmate a winter coat, she could have easily said no. She could have said, there's resources for that. You don't need to do that, but she didn't. She allowed her heart to speak, and it became in time with her 7-year-old daughter. And truly, the fact that I still talk about this as my first recollection of empathy means that my mom's actions helped me to feel seen and heard. And honestly, that is what we all want. We all want to be seen and heard. And this is a moment of pause for you to weigh in and share, again, in the chat or the virtual mic, about how you're being empathetic with yourself. How are you being empathetic with yourself? But I'll share another story that someone just told me today. It's about, he heard on the news about around a family photograph, and a family photograph was taken some 30 years ago, and the family's lined up and they're all looking toward the camera, but dad is looking toward the family. And so it's the only family picture they had. It's been hanging on the wall. He never liked it. So his son went and took that picture and photoshopped an image of his father looking straight on into the camera. And now that is the picture that hangs on the wall. And so to me, that is absolutely, unapologetically empathetic. All right, we'll keep going. We will move on to business. And I think we can all agree the pandemic has brought our humanity into the light. There's no way around it to show how connected we are with one another. And I just read this statistic today that according to the US Labor Department, roughly 34.4 million people have quit their jobs this year alone, and 24 million have done so since April. And I know that some of that is they're leveling up in different positions, but also a lot of people are leaving to go and do things that are very impactful in their communities. Nonprofits are popping up all over because people really want to give back, because they've had the time to really start to consider, what do I want my legacy to be? And so I think, why are people leaving? Because of the reasons that I just said, but also that there's not enough empathy in the workplace. And I've heard story again, and you may have all heard about certain things happening in the workplace and demands being put on employees during the pandemic that essentially makes folks want to go. And one of the ways that we can really strengthen our employees and our customer retention is through empathy. And this is done when we allow ourselves to be vulnerable. And this is the second pillar. So we go curiosity, vulnerability now. And part of that vulnerability is asking our employees and customers who want to be seen and heard, just like us, how they're doing. What do they need? How could things be done better? And I'm immediately going to a bank that I banked with for many, many years, and I recently left them. And as I was jumping to another bank, I assumed they would reach out to me and find out, why am I leaving? But they didn't. And 3 months later, they never have. And so what that says to me is, I never mattered to you. I was just a number on a piece of paper. And that is not a good feeling. I think that we can all agree, nobody wants to just be a simple number. And conversely, though, one of my good friends, he retired out now, but he was very high level in a company. And he was given a spotlight award. And I don't know if you're not familiar with that, that's typical in corporate America. Monthly, quarterly, certain employees are pointed out and given a reward, usually a gift card. And he was given a $25 Starbucks gift card. And even though it was nominal, it was just the fact that he was acknowledged for his work. And that's what we want. We want these acknowledgements, these public acknowledgements, and they can't be too big or small. because we all want recognition. And we want to be rewarded for our loyalty and confirmation that what we do matters. And so this is another place where we'll pause. And if anyone wants to weigh in and share in the chat, please do, about times when you've experienced empathy in the workplace or with one of your favorite businesses that you visit. Julie, did you want to say something?
So I was just thinking, I followed this group on Facebook and they're fans of Trader Joe's.
Yes.
No, and so there's always a lot of, apparently, people that will post, I was having a bad day, I was upset, I lost my job, or somebody's sick. And the Trader Joe's employees will add, hey, what's going on? They'll kind of say, I'm not feeling well, whatever. And then the cashier will go and buy them flowers. We'll give them flowers from the, and
Yeah.
it just makes this huge, like, wow, instead of just, yeah, okay, go have your bad day elsewhere.
That dismissiveness.
And I really, when you mention that, I think about like Trader Joe's, and I don't know if that's something that they promote that their staff,
Yeah.
do, but I think about that and how that's something that the customers are never going to forget.
No, exactly. And my thought is, it's what keeps bringing it. You keep going back for that. Care and concern is what it is. Yeah. And so when I suggest in business client care, I am factoring in employees too, because I think our employees are interfacing with our clients and we really want to keep them happy. And one way to do it is exactly what you said, just recognizing what someone's going through. So we will move on to community. And the thing about empathy is we all have it, and it's a choice to put it in action. And it requires us to be conscious of one another. And it's a choice that we can make every day. And one of the things that we need to remember is that the person next to us is going through likely as many challenges as we are, different, perhaps similar. But don't forget that they're struggling too. And the way to connect is that we have to be selfless, and selfless follows vulnerability, as vulnerability follows curiosity. And these are the things we leverage to turn empathy into action. And really, if we really want to connect with one another, we have to be, like I said, selfless and willing to share in the journey together, and realize that we're not the only one here in the room. There's a host of other people, and we can do this through empathy. I recall during my last webinar, there was a gentleman that spoke at the mic, and he indicated that his neighbor, it was a very tenuous relationship with his neighbor, and so bad that he couldn't even park in front of his house. Well, that neighbor lost his home to a fire. And what this gentleman did, he cast aside all of the ill will, and he gave him his slippers and his robe. And boy, if that isn't empathy in action, I don't know what is. And which conjures up another empathy in action, which is, if you're from Texas, you likely remember the winter storm this past February. Who can forget it, right? I was one of those people that on TV, everything that was happening, I was that person. I lost power, lost water, pipes blew. I had scarce resources to healthy food options. But I had friends who were just 5 miles away and they had just low water pressure. And they were kind to me and they offered me when we could finally get back on the road. I went over there and ate a lot. But there were other people, conversely, not so empathetic. And I mention this because by late in the week, there were Austinites, our fellow community members, who were washing their cars and filling up their pools. Meanwhile, their fellow Austinites didn't have any water. A lot of people didn't have power. So I don't believe they did that intentionally, but that's an example of being very, very selfish and completely out of touch with what is happening in your community. And so this is another pause moment for you to share. Again, in the chat or virtually. And Julie, of course, if you have something you'd like to weigh in, please do. Okay. All right, we'll keep going. So putting it all together to put empathy in action. As you can see, we are required to be curious, vulnerable, and selfless. And so I want to know, I have a very inquiring mind. So I want to know, how does what we've learned stack up against what you thought empathy was initially? And this is another moment to weigh in the chat if anyone wants to. So Julie, if you, or certainly anyone else, if you want to share examples when you've been empathetic, when you've been not so empathetic, and there's no good or bad answer with this. I mean, empathy always has room to grow, but we have to first be honest with ourselves and, of course, one another. Okay.
I have one.
Oh, okay.
So, you know, at the library, we interact with members of the public, and everyone is going through something.
Yes.
And sometimes people that, you know, that maybe just kind of rude or
Yeah.
just impatient.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you talk to them a little bit more, you find
Yeah.
out they're going through something really difficult. I had one gentleman and he was a little impatient, but I started helping him, and it turns out he was trying to fax in paperwork because his dad and his brother had both died of COVID.
Oh my goodness.
And so he's trying
wow.
to apply for the
Right.
FEMA funds for the funerals.
Mhm.
And he was like, you know what? I'm so sorry. I'm very stressed out. And so I try to remember that, like, when somebody is kind of not super friendly or closed off, or,
Mhm.
you know, they could be going through something that I can't even imagine. And even without knowing what's going on, just trying to be
Right.
more patient and
Exactly. And really very, very present in the moment. And it might be uncomfortable, but it's a way that we exhibit empathy toward one another. And I would imagine that to this day, he looks at you very, very respectfully because of your patience with him. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. So here are some very, very easy ways to bridge the gap. And simple. And these are things that you can put in action today. In fact, I really, really want you to meet the gaze of someone else, smile and say hello. open the door for someone else. And one of my favorites is pick up your neighbor's paper and put it on their porch. I generally do this on my daily walk. And it's just those simple actions that people recognize, and it's very, very heartwarming. And so, and there is, of course, one more, it's a bonus. It's asking you all to subscribe to my newsletter, and where I share similar monthly take action items. And of course, as you can see, there's other ways to connect with me, and definitely reach out. I'm always up for a conversation, and we can do it virtually, certainly if that's what you're most comfortable with. What I really, really am hoping, like I said, to put these simple actions in play. Join this social movement, because this is a novel social movement, empathy activism, and join me and become a fellow activist and take these actions. And what they'll do is they will cause a ripple effect, and they become everyday occurrences in our lives and our work and community. And eventually it just becomes as natural as breathing. And so I will now move on to Q&A. If there are any questions from anyone in the audience, I am happy to chat about whatever is on your mind.
I have a question.
Sure.
Since you were talking about being part of corporate America,
Yes.
were there any examples that you saw while there? I know you said that it inspired you to, become an empathy activist because you didn't see a lot of empathy in that environment. But did you ever see any examples of empathy that you can share from that time?
So I can absolutely, a couple examples. One is not, well, it's part of what compelled me to create Empathy Uprise. It was at my last position, and it was my last week on the job. And I worked in rare disease, and I worked very, very hard for several months to bring in patients, and the entire month was centered around rare disease. And so I rounded out that week with this entire day affair with patients, and not one person in the C-suite, which is VP and above, acknowledged my hard work. And I did work with the community engagement team to pull off all of these things. But that to me really left me feeling, this is why I'm leaving this job, because I worked so hard and there's no acknowledgement. And even after I left, it wasn't until after I was gone that the CEO emailed me and thanked me, but it was a little late for that. But conversely, I had a manager, he was an extraordinary man. And it was, again, it was my last 14 years I worked in biotech. And he was so, and it was rare disease, he was so patient-centric. And so instead of shareholders first, it was patients first. And that is, if you follow within rare disease, that is a very common occurrence. Patients first, patients first. But truly, he was one of the only leaders that I ever saw actually walking the talk. And so he did something that other biotechs didn't do. And when I say that, I literally mean patients came before profit. And that was extraordinary to me. And I could probably go on after 26 years on and on, but those are two back-to-back examples of areas that just motivated me. And truly, the way that he holds himself is, I really have, I definitely look up to him and respect him so much. And he was so authentic and just such a, just a true heart-centered dude is what he was. Yeah. So thank you for asking. Anybody else? Okay. Well, I want to thank everyone so very much for being here. And I just want you all to go out and shine a light. Be a light unto the darkness, you all, through empathy. And thank you all so very much, and happy holidays.
Thank you, Alicia, for your
Thank you.
presentation. We will
My
be
pleasure.
posting this up on our YouTube channel and sharing it so that we can have hopefully more empathy activists come
Great.
out of
Yes.
this
Woo!
presentation.
Let's do it. We can do it.